I didn't pay back my debt, and I'm still a suspected terrorist.
Might be easy to miss, but there's been a lot of isekai anime coming out here the past few years, and Crunchyroll seems pretty invested in getting many of them dubbed. However, not all of them get as much promotion as others, particularly as much as Shield Hero, and, for the sake of today's video, KonoSuba. When the dub for Season 1 came out in 2019, they even got someone to write an article about how this would be the dub to finally convert all the sub purists. And, look, it would be great if that was actually the case, but just because it wasn't the one to settle the sub versus dub debate doesn't mean that this dub isn't an admirable attempt at capturing the spirit of the original. My name is Eric, and if you'd like to support the Cartoon Cipher, be sure to give the video a like, subscribe for more content covering dubs like this, and maybe check out our Patreon if you'd like to show your support. Also, any corrections can be found in the pinned comment down below. Crunchyroll outsourced the KonoSuba dub to Bang Zoom Entertainment, who gave the project to one of their regular directors, Alex Von David, who jumped at the opportunity as an already established fan of the show, and would even go on to read the original light novels for research. Alex has worked on anime dubs for some of the industry's most popular franchises, and his experience probably gave him a versed understanding of all the tropes you'd expect to pop up in a world like KonoSuba's.
Now that's what I call magic.
Unleash the mayonnaise!
You gotta be...
Most of the minor and reoccurring characters effortlessly fit into their respective archetypes, from Luna, the patient help desk lady, to that one guy who only seems to exist to give single, offhanded, rare platitudes about the main party.
If dying's what you want, dying's what you'll get. Welcome to the gates of hell! Don't dream anything I wouldn't, tough guy. A hero returns. Maybe I was right about him. Or maybe I'm dreaming.
These things sound just fine if a little routine, but I don't think they're all necessarily supposed to stand out. KonoSuba presents us with a fairly recognizable fantasy world. There's towns and guilds and knights and wizards and churches and monsters and devil kings, etc. But then the story seems to ask, what happens when the apparent heroes of our story are some of the most cartoonishly unfit to carry out the job? How would they do it? How would the other characters react to that? The end result is a unique form of comedy that made this isekai a breakout hit anime, punctuated with vocal performances that skirt the line of parody. The original Japanese KonoSuba was going to be a tough act to follow up in any case. Fans were praising the seiyuu from the start of Season 1.
Maybe you should lower your standards a little.
The Japanese audio was directed by one Yoshikazu Iwanami, a highly prolific sound director who's both famous and infamous.
Nope.
Now, repetitive casting is its own issue, but it does help that many of the voice actors in both languages have experience playing a bevy of characters from the same genre. The dub's casting was handled by Bang Zoom's usual casting director, Mami Okada, with Crunchyroll giving final approval on some of the main choices. We can only speculate the specifications of why everyone was cast, but thankfully we reached out to Alex and he said the choices seemed to align with who he also felt was best for each role. So working together, the dub staff came up with creative means to demonstrate these humorous contrasts in a way that feels specific to each character. Of the main party, Megumin's portrayals in both languages feel the most synonymous.
If you're talking about me, don't you dare call me by any name other than my own! If anyone does it again, and I'll show you how crazy I am! I'll incinerate you all right here and now!
This isn't the first time that Erika Mendez and Ria Takahashi have had a role in common, but Megumin is a very different type of character compared to, say, Mashu from the Fate franchise. We also reached out to Erika, and apparently she didn't even think it was a role that she had a chance of booking despite the fact that many felt she was perfect for it. She admitted that she tends to be a bit more reserved, especially in front of other people, so a character like Megumin forced her to step out of the box a little more since she's such an exaggerated personality. Even among Erika's other more outgoing characters, this one stands out. Megumin wants to be seen front and center, having access to one of the strongest spells in this world. But not only is it the only spell that she can use, it also leaves her useless afterwards. She's an arch-wizard that carries herself with a lot of stubborn pride in her powerful yet extremely limited abilities, wrapped up in a flair of posturing that reflects what we usually expect from a typical Chunibyo.
Let my power, no, let my weapon, nope, let my madness, yes!
The incantation is way too time-consuming to use in real combat.
But the incantations have to be long. You ever heard of a short one that was cool?
Both actresses have experience playing characters that lean into those over-the-top anime-esque delusions, and it's on full display, with the only real difference being that Takahashi's voice is a bit higher pitched. As for her iconic explosion, it seems like they tried a few things. In English, it didn't always land the same way as the iconic katakana pronunciation from the Japanese. But other times, she does elongate the second syllable and make the last one as quick as possible for a similar effect. Erika explained that she tends to have little quirks while recording for specific characters. For Megumin, Alex actually got her into the habit of wiggling her finger and making chuni poses while she's in chuni mode, to add a certain flair to the read. It's a shame we can't literally see those little touches for ourselves, even though it sounds like a great way to get in character for a character that herself is trying very hard to stay in character.
Burn to ash in crimson flame.
But while Megumin is similar in both languages, Kayano and Cristina Valenzuela take slightly different approaches in their portrayals of the bold propriety you'd expect from the valiant crusader. Darkness's shtick comes from when we slowly realize she buffed herself up as a tank so that she could willingly throw herself in the face of attacks to satisfy her masochistic desires.
I am a knight, remember? Do you think I would put desire before duty?
Yeah, that's exactly what you're doing.
Kayano plays up the more virtuous aspect of the character so that her attractions appear more extreme. She starts off as sounding more stuttery and bashful, as if the character is in denial about her kinks, but then devolves into this giddy schoolgirl looking forward to punishment. And that's not surprising. Kayano has a huge range, having played characters ranging from lollies to one-samas to literal MILFs. The voice Cristina uses for Darkness is definitely a bit deeper and more sultry. The goals seem to be to lean more into the theatrical Shakespearean, kind of ye olde English dialogue, in order to fit the medieval European-inspired fantasy world, which also felt consistent with Darkness's aristocratic roots.
You're up, Darkness. You get to be useful finally.
What do you mean, finally? I have been useful on most occasions, you know?
Christina's performance here honestly reminds me of what Saber from the Fate franchise usually sounds like in English. Which makes sense since this is the exact type of character that Darkness is meant to be a parody of. Hell, Kayano herself even plays Alice from SAO, who some have joked is the Saber of that series. The irony being that Cristina plays Sakura in Fate, but she sells that side of Darkness well enough that it makes me think she would have been a good pick for Saber herself. You know, among the 3 other dub actresses that have played her over the past 15 odd years.
What shall I do, Kazuma?
How should I know?
I can feel his filthy eyes on me. Hungry, wanting. They are the eyes of a degenerate, one who would make a sex slave of me.
You could argue that Christina's approach is a lot more drawn out and direct, due to the slight differences in particular word choices, since the humor comes from hearing this noble knight use every descriptor she can to sell the image of her getting turned on by the idea of being treated like trash. However, she isn't the only actress in this dub with that direct approach. Aqua is played by gamer girl extraordinaire Faye Mata in the dub, and I'd say her voice sounds the closest to her Seiyu counterpart among the main cast. At the very beginning, both Sora Amamiya and Faye definitely play Aqua with a more slow and methodical pace when the character is trying to present herself as very grand and auspicious.
I stand before you as the omnipotent goddess.
Just call her Aqua, okay?
Obviously, this is all a farce, because when you strip away the position of goddess, she's really just an entitled idiot who cracks at the first sign of danger. The difference, though, is in how we hear those breakdowns in each language version. But let's take a break from Aqua and talk about the dub more generally for a bit. Quite a few people have compared the humor in KonoSuba to something like Seinfeld or It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and I believe KonoSuba does have a similar sense of cynicism, though it's how that humor is specifically delivered that I think has allowed this anime to keep standing out. There's a certain sense of speed and rhythm to how these characters talk in Japanese that I think helps maintain engagement, even if you don't necessarily find this type of humor funny.
そうだカズマさん今日はうちに泊まっていきなさい娘の仲間で友人なら当然
そ
だ
ろそろ私にお供え物の一つぐらい捧げてくれても罰は当たらないわよ。
邪魔しそうなヒョイザブローさんとダクネスは奥さんの手により眠らされている。そもそも外から魔法で鍵がかけられ部屋には誰も入れないし出られない。
いやよ、あんたがおとりになりなさいよ。
バカ、お前はカエルを倒せる攻撃力なんてないだろ。一匹でも倒せれば残るは2匹だ。そうすればお前とセナさんの2人で足止めできる。
そんなにお外に出たいって言うのなら2人だけで行ってきて。
There are moments where it sounds like the seiyuu are almost acting in a prelay show, given the very specific control in their delivery speeds to highlight the extremities by which these characters operate, even though I don't think I've come across any evidence of that being how a majority of the production was handled. Part of that might stem from the fact that the Japanese side doesn't always try to match the exactness of the characters' lip flaps. But that doesn't change the feeling that there's a specific flavor of comedic timing being utilized here. When listening to both versions at the same time, you know, because we're insane, the dub doesn't always match that speed. Given the fact that sentence structure between the Japanese and English languages can be very different, some retooling is just a natural part of the process. And hell, it's fairly often that English translations of Japanese end up taking less time to say the exact same thing.
Hard ticks to be exact, large blood-sucking bugs. If one bites you and infects you with SFTS, it can be fatal, so you have to be careful.
まだに大型の吸血虫
噛まれることによって感染する重症熱性血小板減少症候群は死に至ることもあるので注意。
But in KonoSuba's case, there's a certain chaotic factor that's very hard to emulate, since it practically feels baked specifically into those original performances. So then the question is, if the dub didn't provide exactly that, did it give us something appropriate, worthwhile, and memorable in its place? Alex Von David is an industry veteran who actually writes the dub scripts for a majority of what he directs, rather than having a separate adaptive writer. And unlike a lot of ADR staff, he isn't really an actor by trade, having a background in directing advertisements. He prefers to get as much context on the story as possible, and allow that context to influence him as he writes and directs on instinct, creating a sense of deliberateness and intimacy with every line in the dub. So even when things are reworded or sound different, you can probably trust he has the proper story and characterization in mind, maybe sneaking in an occasional extra pun on the side when he can get away with it. And like, I get that some anime fans have this weird thing with investing trust in dubs, whether that stems from recent examples or ones that are decades old at this point. But in KonoSuba's dub, there are enough deliberate world-building details to make it feel like there's a good sense of vision.
So then, even if I pick a celebrity, or a girl I know, or a 2D waifu, you can make it happen?
Yes, even a 2D waifu, whatever that might be.
Some of it is pretty typical. Characters like Megumin and Darkness use antiquated words like thou and dust, or speak without contractions when they want to be extra flamboyant. There's a couple of fake European accents in the background, etc., etc.
They did it!
Now that it's over, I'm getting married.
Those knuckleheads better shut up or they're gonna trigger a flag!
But beyond that, Kazuma and Aqua are more or less the two main characters leaning into modern-day phrases given their knowledge of our world. However, there are moments where we do need workarounds for modes of addressing people, like honorifics, that sound appropriate for the target language. A few Japanese idioms were changed, when I personally don't think they needed to, but none of them had that much of a knock-on effect and still got a vaguely similar point across.
This isn't the time for cultural translation differences.
Honorifics themselves are removed in the dub, and while it's not always a one-to-one replacement in placement and meaning, characters using language that's more indicative of the imaginary time period felt appropriate. I mean, if you want to get really technical, the characters aren't speaking Japanese or English most of the time.
Thanks to the kind support of us gods, we'll load the language into your brain. You'll be able to speak and read it right when you arrive. There's a chance you'll get overloaded and go poof, but that's rare.
You just mentioned something that sounded serious. Something about going poof?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did.
Again, I think it's fair to disagree with how some of this context is used. Like, not all of Kazuma's slang will land with everyone the same way.
This sucked you by erotic dream service is lit!
But overall, I think Alex was right to try crafting English voices that just feel distinct from Megumin, Darkness, Wiz, and the others in an easy, recognizable way that the audience should be able to pick up on. Whether it's for Kazuma and Aqua, Mitsurugi, who fits much better with what we expect from the standard Isekai protagonist, or that one asshole who's responsible for everything that goes wrong. If you gave me an unlabeled readout of everyone's dialogue, I'd probably be able to tell you who is and isn't from this fantasy world, and there's humor in that contrast too. But you also hear this in just how punchy and expressive almost every line in the dub is delivered. KonoSuba's dub feels like it takes the exact opposite approach to dubs for shows like Baccano. Who would have thought that completely different shows with different audiences and intentions wouldn't be handled in the exact same way? While that dub toned down the typical anime reaction noises, otherwise known as efforts, for the sake of the period and setting, the KonoSuba dub leans very much into those big reactions.
Hold on a minute!
It knows how important they are when crafting these comedic characters, so while it may lack the exact type of build-up found in the original, the dub clearly knows what is being built up as a punchline and why it's so important. There's no real sense of passivity or subtlety. Everything is laid bare, and that aforementioned sense of confidence is turned up to 11. A slightly different approach to be sure, and I definitely expect some fans favoring one way of communicating this exact type of humor over another.
Some may say it's a good change, others may say it's a bad change.
But to me, this seems like a good compromise for communicating the main appeal of the show, without trying to create an exact duplicate of what was present in the original. And again, I think part of what makes it work is how versed the dub staff are with working on the very material that KonoSuba is turning into a punchline.
But I only said that because I thought I'd make a killing off that plus!
Greedy bitch!
My name's not bitch!
In the original, Aqua's more elegant facade ends up getting contrasted with the more fast-paced and almost nonsensical ramblings of the character epically failing, further punctuated by the expressive off-model animation. Faye, on the other hand, compensates for that in spades with what I would argue are louder, more incisive efforts and deliveries. Like a child who doesn't get her way, which, let's face it, still applies to the character 100%. At the very least, she sounds better in English than a certain other Aqua.
Xehanort is feeding the dark fires within you, making you fight.
In fact, in general, I think there's a stronger sense of unapologeticness in how these characters treat each other in the dub, with more of an emphasis on what is being said rather than how. This might feel overwhelming at first, straddling the line when other characters mistake their problematic antics for genuine acts of heroism. But to me, it makes things funnier when others begin to realize just how messed up some of these characters really are. We eventually come across even more characters that push the extremities of their roles just as hard as the main cast. Shout out to Megumin's family, the cult-like townspeople from Season 2, and Robbie Damon as Veneer.
Your confidence in this person does nothing but fill me with dread.
Honestly, some of these reactions in the dub sound so genuine and abrupt that I honestly thought they were improvised. It almost sounds like we're hearing the actors react to what's going on in the scene for the first time.
You wish to defile me, don't you?
What?
According to Alex, though, there wasn't much ad-libbing in the KonoSuba dub. He instead worked with the actors to try and recreate the specific reactions that he imagined while writing the scripts.
I've got very specific ideas on how a lot of these lines work within scenes. I don't have a photographic memory or anything like that, but the adaptation process takes so long, and you have to get very intimate with the script if you're thinking about it like I do. It's like, there's a reason he says this or reacts like this. And so for moments like that, again, it's like there's already something in my head. I just have to make sure that the actor understands it and understands why I'm thinking that. And then hopefully they agree, and hopefully they understand, and hopefully they got the chops to pull it off.
To him, efforts in anime are another trope that the show plays with, as well as an art form in and of themselves. And this is especially noteworthy when you consider the fact that almost everything you hear in the final product is edited somehow. There could be breaths taken out or added in, and lines could be stretched or shrunk to fit sync better. This is fairly common during the mixing process for anime dubs, but the fact that you can't hear that in such an effort-heavy show like KonoSuba is a testament to how natural the team wanted the final product to sound. Major shoutouts to the engineers Kenneth Thompson, Eric Rachelson, Jun Umeda, Ben Harrington, J.P. Aller, and Ricky Watson. However, of all the characters that Alex needed to work on, Kazuma took the most time for a variety of reasons.
Well, I think I did.
Arnie Pantoja wasn't that well versed in anime dubbing at the time of his casting. And arguably hasn't had a lot of dubbing experience since other than Reno. In fact, Kazuma continues to stick out as really his most prominent role at the time of this video. This is a massive difference compared to Jun Fukushima, who has been voicing a wide range of anime characters and doing narration work over the past 2 decades. If the appeal of KonoSuba's comedy revolves around performances that fluctuate in speed and tone, then Kazuma embodies all shades of that through Fukushima's varied reactions. Kazuma is a character that simultaneously acts as a straight man and a jaded pervy realist who fights for gender equality. So Fukushima also picks up the pace of his deliveries in a way that's similar to his other party members, but most of the time it's in response to their often nonsensical antics. And those end up getting more frequent and intense as the series goes on, almost like the guy's becoming more unhinged with each episode and right through the movie too. Other times, Fukushima does sound like a normal teenage otaku. He uses his lower range to add a sense of seriousness to his self-indulgent ponderings. Though the blink and you miss it moments of his more snarky, dry humor are an absolute standout. It's the sudden drop in tone and tempo that just makes something as simple as sound so funny to a lot of people, which is probably why it became a running gag. The dub didn't get the wording consistent right away, but eventually it became a bit more of a recognizable staple.
You see this, Kazuma?
I'm Kazuma, and I'm seeing this.
So, with so many punchlines on the line, Alex had to take extra time walking through the process with Arnie in the booth, and Bang Zoom were willing to oblige. Alex had previously worked with Arnie on Resident Evil Vendetta, but this was their first time working together in anime ADR. Yes, these might sound like rough circumstances for such an expressive character, but that makes it all the more impressive that none of this is reflected in the performance proper. Arnie definitely carries himself with the same degree of aloof laziness as Fukushima does, but with a bit more cynicism right out the gate, as it becomes progressively clear that the character won't be able to live out the typical isekai power fantasy. He wanted to be the Kirito of this world, racking up cool weapons and powers with a flock of adoring girls. But instead, it's more like Kyon from Haruhi or Ryuji from Toradora if they really did say everything that was on their mind. Which feels appropriate as those are other dubs that Alex worked on.
Through 2 in the morning and the party's still on because my mama ain't home. Got my bitches in the living room, they're getting it on. They ain't leaving till 6 in the morning. What you gonna do?
To compensate for his lack of anime experience, Arnie would go with multiple takes back to back for one line and still manage to maintain amazing energy in the process.
We'd preview a line, we'd go to record, and Arnie would give his first take, and then he'd do a B take, and sometimes a C take. We just leave it in record. And that's a technique that a lot of times is used in original animation. Doing that actually eats up a lot of time. For someone like Arnie, I already warned Bang Zoom right after the first couple of sessions, hey, this guy doesn't have as much experience doing anime as you told me. We're going slow, and you need to prepare for that in your schedule. Over time, Arnie gradually got used to listening to the Japanese preview, taking his cues for volume, intensity, sync, emotion, all that stuff from them.
A lot of Arnie's reactions had this wild squealiness to them. And Alex claimed that they always kept those takes over trying to emulate Fukushima 100% of the time. You'll quickly notice that Kazuma doesn't do that sudden drop in range in English as much as he did in Japanese. But Alex and Arnie compensate by taking advantage of the fact that Kazuma would be allowed more slang to tie into his reactions, as someone from the modern world. The end result was a performance that doesn't intentionally fluctuate as much as the original, and maybe that lessens the self-seriousness Kazuma has about himself. However, Arnie is still good at overplaying the disillusioned, borderline manic whininess, leaving us with zingers and reactions that sound like your everyday asshole is being dragged deeper into a well of bottomless insanity.
Arnie loved the show. He was always up for anything. He's one of those types of actors who would come in with a huge smile, and even though it was a 3-hour session that wore him out at the end, he always left with a big smile. And he always, was very appreciative of how hard we were trying to help him be his best.
And this was part of the reason Alex felt that Arnie was one of the best choices to play Kazuma in English. He doesn't sound like a polished anime dub voice actor. Compared to all the other characters played by more familiar talent with other isekai, Arnie sounds like he's from another world because when standing next to the rest of his party, he kind of is. And getting someone genuinely unfamiliar with these fantasy worlds to react to an absurd parody of them feels genuinely appropriate.
I hate my popular
None of this might matter, because at the end of the day, I'm literally the guy who's explaining the joke to you. Comedy is super subjective, but when you remove your personal tastes from the equation, the appeal of KonoSuba is all about finding the balance between the conventional and the overblown extremes. I think the dub understands this, was wary of the specific hurdles inherent with approaching said material, but never lost sight of properly displaying that balance as best it could. No, it's not exactly like what was found in the original, but I think it succeeds more than it falters.
Every show has its weak spots, and I don't mean this in any sort of derogatory way. Everybody's got limitations, but it's my job as a director to make those limitations not be apparent, to make things as seamless as possible for the audience.
There's nothing like laughter to ease the stress of one's day.
KonoSuba wasn't the first anime dub Crunchyroll commissioned, nor was it the only isekai that they've heavily marketed. But I think it makes sense why the company gives this dub more attention.
Thanks for watching, everyone. This is Arby here. I co-edited this video alongside Mr. Nice Guy while Eric wrote and narrated it. I would just like to disclaim that I do not endorse any statements made in this video about the apparent quality of KonoSuba's comedy. It's a bad show, you should feel bad for liking it, and everything else you think is funny probably sucks.
Please tell us in the comments below whether or not you liked KonoSuba's dub, or any of the other works its key players have been a part of. A big thank you to Erica Mendez and Alex Von David for answering our questions about the dub, and you can find the full interview we did with the latter linked below in the description. Plus, as usual, any updates or corrections to what we mentioned here can be found in the pinned comment down below. Don't forget to give this video a like and share it around if you enjoy it. Plus, if you want to see more videos like this discussing English dubs, then be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter to stay updated. You can also help us out by checking out our Patreon page. Massive thanks to the generous people donating already, including Reagan Senpai, Andrew Wade Pittman, Brandon, Jose Argumedo, JR Pictures, Marissa Lenti, Spartacus, Ryan Rodriguez, Queen Era 2, Tristan Gallant, Unknown Secret 1000, and Xavier Gordon. This has been the Cartoon Cipher, and until next time.
It's society's fault if you fail!